In this video, we're going to talk about inflation and continue looking at the three indicators that will help us tell where we are in the business cycle, as well as the best monetary and fiscal policy that should be enacted. So, when we're using inflation, what we're trying to do is measure price stability. So, when we look at a country and we look at their inflation rate, that will tell us if their economy is stable or if there are some issues. Now, it won't tell us what the issues are, but for instance, if we look at a country and we notice that their inflation rate is high, that means prices are changing very frequently, which is not a good thing. Where if they are experiencing deflation, that tells us prices are dropping. So we don't know why it's happening, but we can use that to give us an idea about the stability of prices and the overall economy. So in the United States, we measure inflation every month. So we want to know what is the percent change every month. So we are on top of it. So we don't want to wait like 3 months like we do with GDP and say, okay, well, what's happening to prices? Because if prices are changing quite quickly, 3 months is too long to accurately intervene without causing major damaging effects on individuals, right? Because we're talking about price of goods. So if prices of goods are increasing dramatically, that is much more of a burden on consumers. We would want to address that sooner. Okay, so the Bureau of Labor Statistics is the government agency responsible for monitoring this. So they do both inflation and unemployment. And then they report that information, and then the Fed and the government can take it and use it how they need to. So they calculate inflation using what's called the Consumer Price Index. So this is a market basket of prices. So if you click on this link, it will take you here, or if you use the link on the lesson page, and you can see all of the items that are used in the market basket that we look at the prices of every month, right? So it's a long list and it covers all different industries. We don't want to focus in on just one or two industries and leave out a bunch because we're trying to get an overall idea of what's happening to prices of all things. It's called aggregate supply. So as you're looking through here, you'll notice it gets specific in each of these areas as to what's being calculated here. So we take that information, what does it cost now minus what did it cost before, compare that to what's called a base year, and then that gives us the inflation rate. Okay, so it's a little bit of a process here, but it is the method that is used by the government. So we take that information and then that is going to tell us what is happening with prices. So if we see that there is inflation, what that means is that there is a general rise in prices. The prices of most things has been increasing. Now, having inflation generally is not a bad thing. If our economy is growing, we actually want a little bit of inflation. 2% is the target inflation rate. That is considered a good rate of price increase, and that is year to year. So if the economy is growing, that means consumers have more money, they're spending that money, higher demand leads to higher prices. So a 0% inflation rate is not the goal. That would mean your economy is not growing. That's not good. So the goal then is to keep it there. So currently our inflation rate is 6.8% from November 2020 to November 21. So we are not meeting that target rate. That means prices are increasing more quickly than what we would like to see. So that is when we would want our fiscal or monetary policy to intervene here. Okay, so that's the goal, is to keep a good steady rate of inflation. Now, the reason we have inflation comes down to two different reasons. Something called cost push inflation, and the other is called demand pull. So if you remember when we talked about supply and demand, we said there's a supply side and there's a demand side. So cost push inflation is prices increasing due to a supply issue. So in this case, it is becoming more expensive for businesses to operate, and so they need to raise their prices to cover those added expenses. Okay, so this can be for any reason that we see prices going up to operate. That it does have to be something that is general to all businesses, right? If it's specific just to one industry, that's not going to affect the prices for all things. So some examples of what this could be: if the state or the government, the federal government raises minimum wage, then every business who charges minimum wage will have to raise, excuse me, the amount of money they're paying their workers. That's a higher cost to operate, so they would have to raise their prices to cover that. If gas prices increase, that's going to lead to higher prices because all businesses, in some way, shape, or form, pay for transportation or pay for the use of gas. So they would have to increase that to cover the cost. It could be something like taxes going up. They would raise they raise prices to cover that. If like electricity went up, that would affect almost everybody. So anything that comes with a higher cost is going to lead to higher prices. Now it's not just the cost of it. We're talking about cost of operation, but it could be something just like the fact that businesses are struggling to operate enough to meet demand. So there's a shortage in supply that could cause to higher costs. They don't have enough product to meet demand, right? So that cost push is what we're looking at. Demand pull then is on the demand side of things. When consumers are demanding more and more product, it is going to lead to higher prices, right? Again, think about our supply and demand graphs. If our demand curve increases, it drives the price for products up. So, in a growing economy, you would have more demand pull inflation, right? With people making more money, wanting to buy more products, that would push those prices up. Now, as long as wages keep up with the rising prices, then inflation is not a big issue. Okay, and like I said, it doesn't mean that one of these is good and one is bad. It's just different periods in time, we see different reasons for why prices are increasing. Now, currently with our 6.8%, we're seeing that higher costs for things, higher prices because of both of these. So, since COVID, we've had both a cost push issues and demand pull. So, when people were staying at home, businesses were closing, they were not spending as much money. So that leaves more money in your bank account. On top of that, the stimulus checks went out twice by the federal government. On top of that, you had people who weren't working because their jobs were not there. We're making more money with unemployment checks. And so you saw more money in people's bank accounts since COVID hit than what there was before. So if people have more money, they want to spend that money. So there's a lot more demand for products than what there was before COVID. Okay, now at the same time, you have some supply issues going on, right? Businesses are closed, so there's less supply, or they're open with limited hours because they're not able to have enough workers to keep operating hours full time. We also know that the lockdowns happened worldwide. So it's not just manufacturing in the United States, it's manufacturing in all countries or in most countries. So the ability to get more product has slowed. So they have less supply. They're going to raise the prices to kind of combat that shortage. If the products are arriving in the United States, we don't have enough people working at the docks. We don't have enough truckers to get the product where it needs to go. And so all of those are causing higher costs on the supply side. So we're kind of taking two hits towards an increase in prices. So unless some of this changes, it will continue to get worse before it gets better. Okay, go ahead and go to the next video as we finish up talking about inflation here.